ready to really kick off Poly Living Rocky Mountain 2015? Awesome. Hey guys, I am Minx. I am the producer and host of the Poly Weekly podcast, which you probably know has been in continuous production for the last 10 years, now over 400 episodes. And it very often felt like, we saw a little review of Poly in the media, it very often felt like the media was just deliberately out to get us, or to turn polyamory into a giant sex scandal. Nowadays, polyamory is kind of the hip new thing. It's what all the kids are doing. Polyamory is like kind of hip and cool now. So I thought it might be a good time to stop and think about how did we get here, what have we learned along the way, and where do we need to be, where are we moving forward in the future. So let's go ahead and start back with coining the word polyamory back in 1990. I'm going back a little further than 10 years. So this is the first thing you need to do to become mainstream and move from scandalous to swank, is to actually have a word for what it is that you do. And Morning Glory Zell, you probably know, coined the word polyamory in her 1990 essay, Bouquet of Lovers, but of course it existed long before then. We just didn't really have a well-known word for it. And at that time, journalists would not use the word polyamory in an article because they didn't think anybody would know what it meant. So you had to refer to open marriage, or sometimes swinging, or non-monogamy, something like that. We've got our word coined, and then of course out came Loving More magazine, also in the 90s. So we now have a publication, a physical publication that people can receive in their mailboxes to find out more about polyamory and build community. Oh yeah, that's the next thing we need to do, is build community. And of course we can do this locally, but you guys remember this. We did have a few places we could go online in the 90s. There was the LiveJournal polyamory group, and alt.net had a poly group as well. Do you remember this like highly advanced web design? Late 90s, top of technology, super high tech. But then the next thing was that we needed to be recognized. We needed for the rest of the world to know what polyamory was, and the best way to do that was on September 14th, 2006, the Oxford English Dictionary finally recognized polyamory as a word. We were a word. Journalists could use this in articles again. It was fantastic. This was through their ongoing revision and supplement series, and we had the privilege of being included with other new words like manga, and ringtone, and supersize. So the next thing is we needed to get a little bit more recognition, and a lot of this was due to Robin and Loving More's tireless efforts in terms of sending out press releases and making more and more journalists and news outlets aware of polyamory. Getting published nationally, in 2008, is when the Washington Post published this article, Pairs with Spares, to much outrage and alarm. So Kristen Fife in the Newsbusters blog said about this article, in what can only be described as a Valentine to immorality and provocative behavior, the Post ran a 2,554-word feature on polyamory that describes a practice that most readers, even the liberal fans of the Post, would find disturbing. And then there were more articles that came out. In 2008, Regina Lynn in Wired published this post called Internet Pushes Polyamory to Its Tipping Point, which for me is very special. That was actually the first article I was quoted in ever. I was so nervous, I don't even know exactly what I said. And then in 2009, we had Family, the web series, created by Teresa Greenan from the city I currently live in, Seattle, and it was this wonderful sort of sitcom type of web series depicting all sorts of situations that are all too familiar if you have actually been in any type of polyamorous relationship. And through the magic of YouTube, a lot more people got exposed to polyamory outside of the newspapers in a little bit more humorous space, which was really great for us. And then it happened in 2009. Newsweek came out with this feature. Now, the other publications before this, you could argue were a little bit more liberal, a little bit more fringe. Even Wired is just for the tech geeks, right? but Newsweek is pretty much as mainstream as you can get. And the response to this was interesting. So at the time, Anita Wagner discussed some of the least complimentary comments that were piling onto the Newsweek site after publishing this article. She discussed this on her Practical Polyamory blog, which, by the way, you should read if you don't already. And there was a distinct contrast, as there has traditionally been, between the negative comments, which were just ugly, spiteful, mean, vengeful, and the positive comments, which were generally polite, thoughtful, and well presented. There was a stark contrast. And this has been true in a lot of poly news articles in general, so guys, we're totally winning the comment wars, because when we say positive things, we do it in a nice, productive way, and the people who are detracting from us, not usually being so nice. So remember, character is everything, and the goddess of Java says, be a credit to your kink, I say be a credit to your poly. So let's look at some of the negative comments, because they were just too fun to resist. So there were those who believed in fire and brimstone, fornicators, we're all going to get what's coming to us. Yay, we're going to get what's coming to us. Fantastic. Woohoo! Great. Fornicating like rabbits. Awesome. And then there were those who believed that love is a zero-sum game, and if you love more than one person, you're taking away love from someone else. I really hope this commenter does not have more than one child. And then there are the ones who believe that we are deluding ourselves about what love really is, or we are too afraid to love, or we're just too cool to love just one person, because we're too hip. And then there was the argument that it's not masculine, the whole boys will be boys argument. And actually, since the movement has traditionally been pioneered by women, you'll probably notice that 90% of the leaders, speakers, organizers, activists for polyamory are women. I guess this guy is actually a little bit right. I guess that's true. And then there's always, this, like, the weird wannabe spam bot, pseudo-intellectual, whatever this guy was trying to say. There's always a couple of those. So then we hit the 2010s. And I feel like at this point, we're in the 2010s or 20-teens, whatever you want to call it. And I feel like at this point, the poly movement we're that super smart teenager, a little too smart for our own good, and we're still kind of in that awkward phase where we're learning how to live in the world instead of fighting and arguing with everybody all the time and being that rebellious teenager. The truth is that we are, in terms of polyamory, we are growing in terms of population. We are growing in terms of awareness and in our own confidence. There are more and more people that are feeling comfortable enough to come out as polyamorous every day. And we choose that instead of living quietly, which frankly is a lot safer for most of us. And I feel like polyamory in general and polyamorists have matured. I feel like we've become more inclusive. We are respecting gender identity, we are respecting race, and we are respecting socioeconomic diversity within the movement. And you can really tell that in what we have produced. There are over 40 nonfiction books out right now about polyamory. There is absolutely no excuse for anyone not to be educated on a plethora of ways to find out more about polyamory, non-monogamy, whatever you want. And in addition to that, there are conferences, not just Loving More, but lots of local conferences and statewide conferences springing up not all over the US, but all over the world. There are conferences in South Africa and in Sweden and in the UK. There are all kinds of people that are taking the time and the effort and the blood, sweat, and tears to put together these events so people can come together with a sense of community. And also, if you look online, which tends to be the first place I always go, in 1990, if you searched for the word polyamory on what there was of the internet at that time, it returned 5 results, all of which were PhD papers, and that was it. In 2015, 643,000 references just to the word polyamory, not polyamorous, polyamorists, not swinging, not non-monogamy, just polyamory. So more and more people are becoming aware that this exists and are searching for it on Google. So let's take a look at that's sort of where we are in the movement. Let's take a little step back and think about where we are culturally in terms of the bigger culture at large. First of all, as was mentioned earlier, there is an increasing acceptance of gay marriage, not just around the world, but in the States. There are some states I never thought would accept gay marriage that have, tentatively, and there are more and more. The dominoes are falling every day, which is great. There's also recently been a Pew study that showed that 69% of your millennials, that's people aged 18 to 24 at this time, think that society is better off if people prioritize things other than traditional marriage and traditional family. And in 2010, the average marriage age was 26 and a half for women and 29 for men. It's just getting older and older all the time. People find better things to do than to just follow that single one relationship escalator, that single path. However, that being said, within the poly community, we are all still fighting like teenagers and spending way too much time online telling everybody else that they are doing poly wrong, that swingers are bad and dirty, and that we all need to die in a fire because your poly doesn't look like my poly. There was an episode, and yeah, you can look on my blog and see everybody's doing poly wrong and needs to die in a fire. It is actually my blog post on tolerance, despite the title. So I thought this was maybe a good time to take a little pause and talk about, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary of Polyamory Weekly. Thank you. And at that time, I actually took 2 seconds to sit back and think about something other than just producing the next podcast episode. And I thought it was a good time to talk about what it is that I feel I've learned in the last 10 years of following polyamory, not just people's relationships, but the media trends as well. And there are 5 basic things that I came up with, just me personally. The first one is that many voices are more powerful than one. I feel that my experiences are fairly common and fairly relatable when it comes to polyamory, but I also have come to understand that not everybody is like me. So the more voices we have in the community, online and in real life, sharing both poly joy and poly issues, the better. The more diversity we have, the more we can show, the better. I will always help other people start up a podcast or a blog or a conference to the extent that I have the time and energy to do so, because more voices are better. More voices make us stronger. It's not about competing. There's plenty to go around for everyone. Also, respect and tolerance are the words of the day. If you go onto any poly forum or group or discussion list, you are going to find things that are not representative, I feel, of the community at large. This is the place where people go to discuss problems, and people are very often in a mood when they're on the internet and come across as a little less tolerant than we'd actually like. I believe that when you treat others with respect and with tolerance, that you get respect and tolerance in return. And I can prove it, because in 10 years of podcasting, I have never received one piece of hate mail, ever. I've never had anybody call in and with any comment that was so negative that I would call it hate mail. Now, I do get critiques and suggestions for improvement, most of which are usually 10-paragraph emails, the first 3 of which are apologizing for having a difference of opinion and for making the correction. Incredibly polite and respectful. And I do feel that's because we try very hard, I slip up sometimes, I admit it, but we try very hard to be respectful and tolerant of everybody out there, regardless of whether they choose to be poly or not, regardless of whether they self-identify as poly, kinky, monogamous, swinger, sexual, asexual, cisgender, transgender, whatever you want. If we want people to tolerate us, we need to respect other people's choices and orientations as well. Thank you. A few years in, I don't remember exactly when, I decided to start the Happy Poly Moment section of the podcast, and I have got a lot of positive feedback for that. In fact, I just had someone write in and say, please put in more Happy Poly Moments, because I'm hanging on by a thread. I got nothing but drama. It's not working for me. And those things are the only things that make me believe that this is actually going to work for me. It is incredibly important. We spend a lot of time talking about the issues with our relationships. it's equally important to celebrate the joy. Relationships are hard, whether you're poly, mono, or anything in between. It's very important we can focus on the negative because that's what we spend all the time talking about our friends with over glasses of wine. But it's important to celebrate the joys. And I have made a point of journaling, and then when I gave up journaling, I just made sure I was posting all the positive stuff on Facebook as well, because it's important for us to know that our lives are not just polydrama, and they're not just the travails that we go through, but there is a lot of joy in it as well. I also learned that there is a lot that I do not know. My fans have made me aware of all kinds of trends and communities and things I never knew existed. I didn't know what /fic was until somebody wrote in, and they're like, Minx, you're gonna love this. And I'm like, holy crap, this is awesome. But transgenderism, asexuality, /fics, right? So /fic is fan fiction generally written by women about popular characters, could be from TV shows, comic books, any type of literature or any type of media. It's typically used to describe two characters having a relationship that is not actually depicted in the original genre. For example, you know, Kirk Picard /fic, or Xander Spike /fic from Buffy. It's traditionally written by women, although men write it too, and it's traditionally depicting a lot of really hot gay sex. So for people who say that women don't like porn, women are the ones writing all that dirty, dirty same-sex /fic. Yum. Woo! Absolutely. It was fun for me too. So there was a lot that I don't know. I also discovered there is a lot that I do know. Like many people, I suffer from that self-worth syndrome of, well, if I know it, it couldn't have been that hard to figure out. Or if I know it, it must not really be that worthy of having. Taking the time to develop this podcast content over the last years and seminar and session content, like Leslie Guy and I will be presenting here at Poly Living today, has taught me that there is a lot of value in my experiences and that they are worth sharing. I learned a lot about happy relationships. And I continue to learn a lot about happy relationships. Any session that I give on happy and healthy relationships 5 years from now will probably be different from the one that I give today. I continue to learn. So let's take a look at where we need to be, moving forward, thinking of the future. I think that it's very important that as polyamorous educators, activists, that we need to be patient. I spend a lot of time online. Unfortunately, because of some health reasons, I spend a little more time online than I actually would like to instead of going out and getting out into the public eye. But angry does not play well. It doesn't play well at home, it doesn't play well at work, and it doesn't play well in the media. If you write or talk about polyamory where other people can see and hear you, and yes, that counts Facebook, even your private super filtered account, you really have to learn to be patient with ignorance. And you have to learn to be patient with belligerents and with other polys or monos that don't agree with you. And this is hard for me to learn, and I still learn, right? I still learn to be patient, but the thing is, if we are speaking about poly, we really need to put our patient hats on. And that goes to the next thing, which is that whether you like it or not, if you have come out to anybody as poly, guess what? You are the authority on all things poly for that person and all of their friends, whether you consider yourself an activist and an educator or not. So you're representing all of us. Everything you do will be scrutinized. It's not really fair, but that's the way it is. So I would encourage you to constantly strive to be better, to be more patient, to consider yourself a teacher. It's not about justifying your own lifestyle. I like to think of it as putting on my teaching hat. Like, this isn't about me and my choices, doesn't have anything to do with that. This is about educating them about the ability to make choices. And we can't expect others that we just came out to know what we know. We had a year, 5 years, 10 years to become comfortable with the idea of poly and with its place in the media, its place in the world, and its place in our hearts. The person you just came out to had 5 minutes. We can't expect them to get to where we are in 5 minutes. So we have to remember it took us a long time to get here. It's probably going to take them a while too. We have to be really patient. So here's what I want to shoot for. We want to be boring. Okay? We're shooting for boring. I want polyamory to be taken for granted as much as monogamous marriage rights. Because, guys, you know this is true, that good relationships look really boring on the outside, right? The good, healthy relationships look really boring. This is my call to action for you for this conference. Let's get boring. That's what we're shooting for, yes. Because what I would really like to see for polyamory is that I would love for polyamory to be one mainstream option. I'd like it to be like, I can live in a house, or I can live in an apartment, or in a yurt. I can have a job, I can work at home. I can be married, I can be unmarried. I can have creamy, or I can have crunchy. I can be poly, or I can be mono, or anything in between. I would just love for this to be a valid relationship option for anybody and everybody. I want everybody to have heard of it. So, in conclusion, that is a quick look at the 10 years of how polyamory became more mainstream than peanut butter. It may not be that glamorous, but damn, it's really, really good. All right, catch 'em.